Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 276. It is the power of memory that gives rise to the power of imagination. Akira Kurosawa.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Blackbox. Blackbox is a new platform and community that is all about financial freedom for filmmakers like you. If you join Blackbox, you will be transformed from being a worker to being a maker of your own content. And you'll be making steady passive income from the global market. Blackbox currently allows you to upload your stock footage once, get it to many global agencies, and then allows you to share that passive income stream with your collaborators. Whether you want to submit old footage that's been sitting around in your hard drives or create brand new content, Blackbox is for you. It's really quite revolutionary. With Blackbox, filmmakers can concentrate on making great content while Blackbox takes care of all the business BS. Just visit www.blackbox.global to find out more. And today's show is also sponsored by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. If you want access to filmmaking documentaries, feature films about filmmaking, interviews with some of the top screenwriters and filmmakers in Hollywood, as well as educational online courses all in one place, IFH TV is for you. Just head over to indiefilmhustle.tv. Now, before we get started, I do have to address the elephant in the room, which is IFH TV. I want to thank everybody who signed up, and it was a massive launch for Indie Film Hustle TV. I want to thank all of the tribe, all of the new members of the tribe who are right now, as we speak, watching documentaries, watching online courses, watching exclusive interviews, and all the other kind of cool stuff that we have on IFH TV. I just want to thank you. I'm humbled. I truly, truly am humbled by it. And we have so much more stuff coming in December, January, and in the future for IFH TV. So every month I will be putting out a special episode of IFH TV. It's not an official episode, but it'll just be the things that we'll be bringing to IFH TV every month. We'll be doing that as well. So keep an eye out for that. But thank you guys again. And I want to give a big shout out to every Indie Film Hustle tribe member I ran into at AFM at the American Film Market. That was it was so awesome to talk to you guys. I spoke to a lot of you guys one-on-one for a while. I met some of you guys at parties on this, just walking around AFM. I was humbled by your kind words. Thank you again so much for being part of our tribe. And I'm so glad that I could be of service to you on your filmmaking journey. So thank you so, so much. And I will be having a AFM wrap-up episode coming up in the next episode or two, so keep an eye out for that as well. Now, today's show has Willaim Dickerson, the author of Detour Hollywood, How to Direct a Microbudget Film. Now, I want to have Willaim on because he wrote this awesome book about how he directed his first microbudget film. And I wanted to get in the weeds a bit to show the tribe what the nuts and bolts of actually shooting a microbudget film actually looks like. And Willaim has an amazing perspective on it as well. He's done multiple movies like this, and he did it because he was tired of waiting for other people to give him permission to make his movie. So I thought it would be extremely inspirational as well as extremely informational for the tribe. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Willaim Dickerson. I'd like to welcome to the show Willaim Dickerson, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm really happy to be here.
Thanks, man. There's few other micro budget gurus out there that I can talk to. So thank you for hopefully coming in and dropping some bombs on the knowledge bombs on the tribe today.
I hope to drop a few.
So first and foremost, why in God's green earth did you get into this business?
Oh gosh, I mean, I don't think it's that uncommon. My rationale. I mean, I just love movies. I grew up in a time, where. I was talking to someone the other day about how lucky I am to, I'm 39 years old. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, I grew up with, Steven Spielberg's movies. And then in my teenage years, it was the explosion of, alternative and grunge rock. And I became a musician. So it's like these two tremendous art forms that informed my life, music and movies. I felt that I just sort of was there at the right age, at the right time to be influenced by these waves. And from that point on, I was like, I have to express myself through art, and it's primarily through movies that sort of hooked me.
And then what made you jump into the micro budget world of filmmaking and kind of doing things outside of the Hollywood system? Did you ever try to get invited to the party and got kicked out like
sure.
me?
Oh yeah. I mean, I did. I mean, I went to grad school for film at the American Film Institute. I graduated in 2006.
Very fancy, sir. Very fancy.
Yeah. Well,
Extremely fancy.
And then of course, I thought, well, I got the world in my hand.
I'm good now. I'm good. I have AFI on my resume. Where's the money? Where's it? Come on,
yeah, exactly. And I had a quote unquote a hot short film, and I come out of there, and literally as I'm trying to assimilate myself into Hollywood, the writer's strike happened.
Yes, I remember that very, very well.
Yeah, which lasted, I think about 2 years. I mean, it was really a tough time.
It was we call that the dark times.
Seriously.
It was a rough time in the Hollywood. Yeah.
It was, and I wasn't in any guild, but what happened was like my scripts, no one would look at them. Just like, well, we can't. It's a complete shutdown. So as far as trying to get yourself a job in the industry is really difficult, particularly as a writer. So that was sort of like, okay, I'm sitting on my hands for a year. I got to do something, and that's where the idea of a micro budget film came into play. It's like, you know what, I know how to do this, but how can I do it myself? Is that actually realistic? And so my writing partner and I decided just to write with budget in mind, which film professors tell you to never do. But we're like, okay, what can we do with like one guy, one location? And that's how Detour came about, which is my first film about a guy, an advertising executive who was trapped in his car during a mudslide. So logistically manageable, right?
Very.
But of course, to go back to your question, it turned out to be a pretty decent script, and it could be done for nothing. By nothing, I mean, 10, 15 grand if I, beg, borrow, and steal. But this person liked it, that person liked it, and suddenly Hollywood sort of put its hands around its throat and said, oh, okay, we can give you $1 million, and we have this famous person who's interested, or that famous person. So of course I was tempted. I was like, I could make this movie for nothing with, my friends, or I can tread down this path of enticement and see where it leads. And what it led to was 3 years of deals that went nowhere.
I'm absolutely shocked. I can't believe that has happened. It's so rare in Hollywood. Yeah. I mean, I've did that for 20 years. I'm not even joking you. Wow. I wasn't as smart as you. I kept chasing the carrot and meetings and and it was like, it's just around the corner. It's just around the corner. And I decided no.
Always is. Yeah. I mean, it was tough because, again, it was right out of school. I'm sure you felt similarly, like, oh man, this person's interested, and that's great. I'm having these great meetings. Everyone loves it. But when push comes to shove,
sure.
Yeah, the money's just doesn't come through, or they pull out at the last minute, and you spend all this time working for nothing, by the way.
Of course, obviously. No one's going to pay you for development. That's
of
insane.
Course not.
That's insane. So you went down this whole road, and you figured out after 3 years that this is not going to happen.
It's about time. I better either I'm doing it or I'm not doing it. And the good thing is that I always knew that I wrote this thing to make for nothing, and that gave me a lot of courage and strength to say, you know what, I don't need Hollywood to do this. It's fun and interesting that these people are interested, but I'm just gonna do it. And once I made that decision, everything fell into place. We made a proof of concept for the film, which is just myself, the actor Neil Hopkins, and my DP Rob Craich, who I went to AFI with, and we just shot it in his garage in his car. So I took it around to some small financiers or just people who are interested in the film. Like, this is what I can do. This is the actor that I want. He's very compelling in the role. And we were able to raise just a little bit of money. By a little bit of money, I mean $40,000.
That's not. I mean, look, in my world, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, no, seriously. Yeah, I mean, I intended to make this thing for $10,000, so $40,000. I was like, oh, this is a big budget movie.
This is like we could eat every day.
Yeah. And we cobbled it together, and we made a movie, and we're logistically mindful of everything. And
we'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
We ended up a year. Let's see. That was 2010, and then of course, we ran out of money in post.
Again, you're just throwing shocks at me left and right. But let's back up for a second. This is 2010. So I remember when I did my $50,000 short film. Let's not get into that. Around 2011. So the technology around that time, if I remember, the Red was out. Did you shoot this on the Red? What did you shoot on?
I did. Yeah,
shot on Red 1.
Yeah, Red 1.
And the post workflow was fantastic, wasn't it?
It was great.
So you were actually doing it at a time where, like today, in today's technology, in today's world, $40,000 will go a lot farther than it did in 2010.
Yeah, I mean, technology is in such a place where if you're smart, even at a consumer level, you can make a real quality looking film.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you got lost. So you run out of money in post. I'm assuming because of workflow issues and other things.
Yeah, and I mean, so we got it to a point where we had a picture lock, but there was no sound or color, post sound color, right?
Right.
So it didn't quite look like a real movie.
And you shot in 4K, and your hard drives probably were like packed to the brim. And
exactly. But the thing was, we had something to show people, and then I was able. This is when I was able to use my the meager Hollywood contacts that I had acquired, and I took it around to people who had turned me down or whatever, or weren't interested at first. And I said, hey, let's screen the film. This is a movie that can have legs. We didn't shoot it for that much, so we just need a little bit more money for post. And I ended up taking it to this company called Level 1 Entertainment, and I had one of the best meetings I've ever had. We screened the film, and meanwhile, the owner, Bill Tobin, he's sort of moaning and groaning throughout. And I'm like, oh man, is that a good sign or a bad sign? This is he ate the film. And at the end, he's like, man, that was a rush. And he said, how much do you want for it? And my producer, I won't say the sum, but it was a lot more money than what we made it for. It's like, we'll do it for this. I was like, oh, who do I write the check to? It's like, really?
It was a different time.
Yeah.
That would never happen today. That would never in a million years happen today. You were in the right. No, I'm serious. Like, if everyone listening, this is 2010, which is honestly, I can't believe it happened then because you were still during the crisis. It was only a couple of years after the crisis happened, the financial crisis.
Yeah.
But in today's world, not as easy.
Not even close. So it was a lucky moment. But the thing was, you got to be lucky moments occur, but you have to be prepared for those moments, right? You got to have your material. You got to be prepared, and we were. And that sort of launched my career as an indie filmmaker.
Now, I want to just kind of highlight something in your story here. You went through this 3-year process, which was a waste of time. You learned, I'm sure, a lot of lessons along the way. Sure. You met some people maybe here and there, but overall, it was just a lot of spinning of your wheels and a lot of waste of time. But when you actually made something, did you find it easier getting in those doors because you are then basically at the 1% of the 1%, that actually do something and don't allow yourself to stop because it didn't have every perfect thing that you were looking for. You're just like, screw it, I'm going to go do this.
Yep.
Is that basically true?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I knew, to become a feature filmmaker, you have to, there's a catch-22. How do you become a feature filmmaker? Well, you have had to have made one before.
Our business is the only business that we literally give our own titles to. Like, you get a business card and like, I'm a director. but even worse, the producer, because everyone's a producer. But a director's like, you need to show that you've directed.
Exactly. So that was the thing. Like, I had to make this feature. So once I did, it elevated me to a much more marketable level. I could take, meetings with bigger companies or people that took me more seriously because it was no longer, And I got this question a ton, I would get this question all the time before I made Detour. It's like, well, you made short films. How can we trust you to make a feature film?
God,
which is such a stupid question.
Son of a bitch. Look, I'll even take you one further. I did commercials, and I did commercials that just didn't happen to have anyone speaking in them. So when a commercial came along that said, "Hey, this has dialogue. Can you handle that?" I'm like,
oh boy,
it's 30 seconds. They're gonna say ooh, ah, and we're done. What's wrong with you? People just don't have
so
vision.
narrow-minded.
They're so narrow-minded. They don't vision. You know why? And I think you would agree with this, that the entire business is run on fear.
Oh, 100%.
It's run completely on fear. And because the budgets are so big sometimes, you make the wrong move, you're done. So I kind of get it from a certain perspective, but you've got to have some balls sometimes, man.
It's especially now, it's all about, risk assessment and very specific strategic demographic research. There's no, taking chances on filmmakers anymore. I mean, maybe here and there, but it's really
rare.
Those days are kind of
Taxi Driver's not being made today.
No, it's not even close.
Not even close to being made today. Like we would have never seen a Taxi Driver today. Easy Rider.
No way.
All those movies from the 70s, all those great movies that they made would never have been made today. Some of the stuff that gets made in the Hollywood system back then, I was like, how did that get through? Yeah. I mean, I can only hope that things are cyclical, right? Because, that revolution, like the golden age of cinema in the late 60s and 70s, that kind of came about because the studio system, those movies they were putting out got so stale. Yeah. And they were making no money. Then they gave they gave the keys to the lunatics to run the asylum.
Exactly. They didn't know what else to do. So, okay, well, you guys try it. And look what happened.
Yeah, exactly. And
maybe something like that will happen in the future. I mean, I'm not a big fan of these huge tentpole movies that are sort of regurgitating this. I mean, there are some good ones, but for me, they're very formulaic and the same thing you've seen before a million times. And I think people will at some point get a bit bored.
I think what Spielberg said really poignantly was that there is going to be an implosion. Yeah. Hollywood will implode on itself because they are taking larger and larger risks.
Correct.
And as soon as if Avatar 2 comes out and does not perform, it could literally crash a studio.
Yeah, and that's scary.
It's literally when you have $500 million on the line, you got one or two of those. And you're done, and that's a big, big risk. And that will happen. I think it will happen eventually. I don't know. I think, we're getting off topic a little bit, but I mean, generally speaking, I don't know if these big tent poles, I do enjoy going to the theaters, to see a Marvel movie because I'm a Marvel geek and, and then the occasional, Dark Knight shows up or Logan shows up where they sneak in an insanely good movie that would be good with or without a superhero in it.
Exactly.
They happen every once in a while as well. But these other things that keep coming out, and I'm not going to throw out names, but but movies that just are so formulaic and people are tired of it. And that's why people I think are going more towards to serialized storytelling, which is Netflix shows, Stranger Things, The Americans, Game of Thrones. That's where people are getting a lot of their entertainment from. That's why Hollywood is kind of starting to feel it a little bit, or at least the feature world is.
Yeah. And that's, I like serialized television. I mean, I think it's brand new territory and there's so much good content out there. Mm-hmm. But the question is, how is that negatively affecting the feature film world? And I think to an extent it is. And I wonder, is there a happy medium? Can these two art forms live together happily, or is one going to destroy the other? I'm not sure.
It's going to be interesting because we have generations being raised like my children, who are young kids. They're watching full seasons of cartoons on Netflix. Like they just I just let them watch a series that was like Spirit, like a horse cartoon, whatever. Yeah. And it was 6 seasons.
Wow.
And they just sat there and binged the entire
massive amount of
series over the course of a week or two. And I was just sitting there going, my God, I waited for Saturday morning cartoons and that was it. You got what? And then maybe, you got something in syndication like He-Man, or Thundercats or something like that, Transformers. And that was it.
Yeah.
So there's a generation being raised on short chunks of entertainment that is serialized as opposed to watching full features.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see. I'm curious to see where it all goes. I don't think features will die. I think there'll always be a place for them somewhere. But I don't
agree. I mean, I think, what makes them different, I think is, a good feature film has a conclusive ending where you're able to have this emotional journey and feel some sort of catharsis at the end, right?
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Whereas the problem with serialized television is the reason why people are binging is because they want to get to that conclusion. But there is never a conclusion because it's television. You have to keep people on a hook to get to the next season, right? And while that is interesting and makes you want to watch, it's not really the better emotional experience. I might argue that the way the feature film is constructed is the more emotionally cathartic and
if it's done
better
right.
experience.
Yeah, if it's done right, absolutely. I would agree. But like even now when we start a new show, my wife and I, she's like, "How many seasons is it?"
Yeah, well, yeah, because you have to commit to it.
Right, it's like you're dating and getting married. It's like, oh god. She's like, how many seasons? How long are the episodes? Oh, how many? No, that's the biggest. Like I showed her like I binged the Alias. That old show with Jennifer Garner.
Oh, yeah, it's a good show. I watched that.
But that was an old network show. So it was 24 episodes a season. And there was like 7 seasons. And she was like, I can't do that again. So now there are more seasons are more like 10, 12 episodes. But she'll ask before she ever jumps in. And I was like, it's so funny how we look at things. But
it is. It is.
All right. So we went off a little bit of a tangent. But
sure.
I wanted to get back to where we were going about micro-budget filmmaking. What is the biggest thing that stops filmmakers from moving forward in their career besides not having money and connections and things like that? But just that mindset. What is that thing?
Boy, I think what I've seen is, I've seen people who have an idea that write the script but are not realistic about the budget. And I think you kind of have to write scripts now if you want to make them. You have to put limitations on yourself, like what we did with Detour. Okay, minimal characters, minimal locations. What costs the money? Because I think taking the leap from the page to production, I mean, that's the giant hurdle because, so many people that I know are inhibited by, okay, well, I haven't found the money yet. We're looking for money. And it almost becomes an excuse not to do it. Like, we're still looking for money.
Isn't it great? No, seriously, I find so many, and I did it. You hide behind, I don't have that camera. Oh, I can't get that actor. Or I can't get the money. And you hide because it does take tremendous amount of cojones to do what you did with your movies, to do what I do with my movies. You put yourself out there. And that's scary.
It is scary. But if you write it in such a way, we all can make a movie. It just takes sacrifice of time. Yeah, you might have to take a part-time job or, your
crowdfund or save some money.
Yeah, your husband and wife hopefully will be able to take care of you for a few unemployed months. But you gotta go all in.
Don't mortgage your house though, please.
No.
Please. I've spoken to filmmakers like, don't do it.
Yeah. Although Scorsese's parents did it for him for Mean Streets.
And also that was the 1970s.
Yeah.
A little bit different world we live in.
It's a bit different.
Yeah, it's a bit different in the world we live in right now. And they knew he was going to be a huge star. But anyway, but I would agree with you. I think hiding behind those excuses are what stop filmmakers. And I'm sure you and I both included in that conversation. It stopped us for a while.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think filmmakers will find other like-minded people who will get on board that train. But it's really up to you to pull that train out of the station. And money is, of course, it takes money and infrastructure to make a movie, but it doesn't have to take a lot. I mean, if you have the time and the passion and the people around you, who will all benefit from a movie being made and getting put out there, you can do it, right? Just do it. Stop putting limitations, put limitations on yourself and just do it. Just make it.
Now, what advice would you give a filmmaker thinking about making a micro-budget feature film?
Well, I think, the commercial part of my brain would say, well, you want to have something that is marketable and saleable. So an idea that can be made for not much money, but you can already see the trailer for and the poster for, because you're going to have to sell this thing afterwards. The artist part of my brain is saying, screw all that, make what you want to make, say something. Because I think there's a lot to that. I mean, if you're going to be putting so much time and effort into a micro-budget film, because this is, as Alex, I mean, when you make a movie, this is like birthing a child. You're going to be raising this child for the rest of your life and see it in the world, and you're going to keep trying to put it out there. So it's a huge commitment. So while you want to be aware of the commercial end of it, how will you sell this? If you're not saying something and it's not personally meaningful to you, then don't do it. Don't bother doing it, because so much time and effort is involved.
Yeah, if you're chasing it for the money, forget it.
No, exactly.
Forget
That's
it.
Just
don't go into the film business to get rich, guys.
No. Yeah, I mean, if the money comes, great, but really, it's about saying something and connecting people emotionally to your point of view, which I think is a really beautiful experience. So that would be my first sort of word of caution to people who want to make a micro budget movie. But like I said before, you have to set limitations on yourself. I mean, at least 1 to 3 main characters. If you supporting characters here and there, but don't go over 4 or 5. One location for 65% of your movie. Just the same location, at least 65%. And then I wouldn't go more than 2 or 3 additional locations. And if you can do it, non-union, great. But SAG will work with you on an ultra low budget agreement. They're reasonable. So those would be the initial guidelines that you would have to stick to while writing the script.
I think the analogy of giving birth, which has been said many times, like making a movie is like giving birth to a baby. But the thing that the filmmakers don't understand is, yes, making a movie is like giving birth. But after the birth, you need to raise the child.
Yes.
You can't just throw the child out into the wilderness and hope for the best, which is what every filmmaker does.
Yeah. I mean,
you've got to raise it. You've got to market it. You've got to take care of it and nurture it through the next year of getting it out into the world. Would you agree?
I agree completely. And and I suggest filmmakers really, think about that and do the research on what that entails post making the film, because it entails a lot. It's a whole different journey. And if they don't, they'll be reminded by the fact that they have to pay taxes on their LLC for, in perpetuity.
No, stop. Oh God, my LLC I just did on my first
feature. That will
feature.
remind you.
Yeah. And especially in California. Oh, I mean, if you live out somewhere that's not California, it might be a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, it's tough. California's tough.
$800 a year.
Yeah, $800 a year.
$800 a year,
and
nonstop.
Likely you won't be making money on the movie for a while. So you're like, why am I paying these taxes? But you gotta keep it open. That's your, business. That's where the money's going to be coming in.
That's so ridiculous.
But
it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. Now, because a lot of times filmmakers will try to go into a micro budget film thinking like a traditional filmmaker, thinking like what they taught them in film school, thinking like I have $20 million. What has to change in the mindset when you're making that micro budget feature?
Well, I think the way you do it, the way you direct a film, has to be extremely efficient. I think a lot of money, filmmakers complain that they never have enough money, even if it's a micro budget, from micro budget to mega budget, right? But the way you shoot it has to be extremely efficient, and you have to be disciplined in your directing approach. And what I mean by that is, don't cover everything, because coverage takes time, right? I mean, yes, we don't burn film anymore. So someone's like, I shoot digital, you save a lot of money. Well, you can shoot one shot or do 12 takes, but all of a sudden you're spending all your up until lunch, 6 hours of your day on one shot, and then you've wasted a ton of time. So what you have to do is really go through the script and beat it out, right? What are the essential beats that I need to film here, and how can I film it specifically so I'm not shooting the same thing over and over and over again? And it's okay not to cover the whole scene, like scene from beginning to end. You can just get a little close up here for a couple of lines, or this little moment with their hands touching on a table. Maybe you don't want to cover their face. It's all about the subtextual behavior that's going on. Just film that. You really have to pre-edit ahead of time.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Because that's what's going to save you money. And also it'll force you to think about what's important. What do I have to shoot? Absolutely. Because every day I will be forced to cut shots. That's without you will be doing that because you're going to be running out of time. So if I only had the time to shoot it this way, how would I shoot it? And if you put yourself into that position ahead of time, that will save you a lot of money ultimately on this micro-budget film.
Now, in your opinion, what are two of the main ingredients of filmmaking?
Well, I mean, I think they're subtext and point of view. I mean, those are the two things a director really needs to understand and execute during production. And just briefly what they are. Subtext, the idea of the word subtext, right? It's underneath the text. So say there's dialogue where someone is saying something, right? Typically in a dramatic scene, the behavior will undermine what they're saying. Because, in real life, we don't really say everything that we mean, right? When you say, hey, Alex, how are you doing today? I'm doing great. Really? Well, you spilled coffee on yourself this morning. So, they're not telling you that story. So you're okay, but you're dealing with like a, minor burn on your leg. So there's these things that we don't talk about in life that we filter all the time. Right. But so what we're saying and what we let people see is the text. Right. But the subtext is what's really going on, underneath the surface. Right. So, for instance, if, there's this great scene in Mulholland Drive, right, where, Naomi Watts is auditioning for a role. And we see this scene done twice. Right. One, it's her practicing with her friend played by Laura Herring, and then the actual audition. She plays it two different ways. It's kind of a masterclass in subtext. The whole scene is this really cheesy scene about, her having an affair with her father's best friend. And because of the situation, she says that she hates him. Right. So the first way, the text is all about, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. But she's playing the hate. So there's no subtext. It's all on the surface, which makes it very boring to watch. It's very on the nose. But in the next scene, she plays it, she's still saying the same dialogue, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. But underneath, she plays it as though she loves this man. And the behavior is that she loves him. And that is interesting to watch. That's conflict. Drama's conflict. So we're watching the text conflict with the subtext. And to make a long story short, that's what equals a good scene. So ideally, when you're writing the script and then directing it, you want to achieve that that conflict between the text and the subtext. And look, if the dialogue's saying the same thing as the behavior, maybe you don't need the dialogue. It might be more interesting to watch a scene without dialogue, and just let the behavior play out. Right. So having a firm understanding of subtext is the first ingredient. The second ingredient is point of view. Is how do you whose eyes are we viewing the scene through? Whose scene is it? So we have to make that determination. Like you talked about Taxi Driver before. That is probably one of the best examples of first-person point of view in filmmaking. Absolutely. Right? Travis Bickle, this is all filtered. This story is filtered through the way he sees the world, right? Which is a world where he's dealing with, at the time, undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder from Vietnam. And the way he sees the world is very, very different from the way, quote unquote, normal or unaffected people view the world. And we see that through the subjective filmmaking of Martin Scorsese. There's this great moment in the movie where there's a scene, because Travis is in every scene. That's how we know. Even when other characters are talking, he's present in the scene to couch it in his point of view. However, the one scene that isn't there is the scene with Harvey Keitel and Jodie Foster, where Jodie Foster wants to not get out of prostitution and wants his blessing, and they're slow dancing in his Harvey Keitel's apartment, and he's sort of coercing her back into the business. And that wasn't originally in the script. What happened was Keitel went to Scorsese, like, I have a really great idea for a scene. Can we do it? And Scorsese was like, well, that's outside Travis's point of view, so we can't do it. But so Keitel was like, I really want to do it. They're like, I like the scene, so let's just shoot it. So they shot it, and what happened was Scorsese really liked it. He's like, this is a really great scene, but how do I make it work within Travis's point of view? So what they did was they reshot a moment with De Niro in the taxi pulling up outside of Keitel's apartment and looking up at the window. And then basically in the movie, he framed it that way. So he shot that moment, then cut from De Niro's look inside the apartment. And then after that scene's over, he comes back out to De Niro looking down from the window and driving away. So we can kind of, we might assume that, hey, maybe that scene is what De Niro was thinking, what Travis Bickle's idea of what was happening in that apartment. It leaves the question open as to whether or not it is his point of view. So it works in the rest of the film. So, you want to have that. You have to make a decision. Whose scene is it? And how subjective is your filmmaking going to be? But either way, you have to weigh the scene towards someone's point of view. So those are really the two big ingredients.
Great answer. Great answer. I've never heard it specifically put that way. So I really, that was a really good way of laying it all out.
Oh, thanks.
Now, can you discuss something called style versus substance? Because there's a rarity of both.
Yeah.
I would argue Fincher's work, Nolan's work, Kubrick's work, and many of the great masters are able to do it. But can you discuss the differences and the whole topic?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think young filmmakers, they get themselves caught in a trap of trying to embrace a style before they've actually formed their own personal voice as a filmmaker. Right? They say, like, I like Tarantino's movies or I like Scorsese's movies, so I'm going to go for that style. And I think that's a terrible mindset. It's detrimental. It'll ultimately be detrimental to the film. What you want to do is, when you write a script or read a script and plan to direct it, you have to find out and figure out what are the best directing choices for this film. And that might not necessarily be a style that you like, right? The great filmmakers, like you mentioned, who have noticeable, recognizable styles, they have mastered taking their voice, their personal voice, and mastered transforming that to the screen. And what I mean by that is, like, you look at Scorsese, any interview with Martin Scorsese, the way he looks, the way he talks, the way he behaves, just if you watch him and listen to him, then you watch one of his movies, it's the same feeling. It's like, that's Martin Scorsese. Like, that's his personality. Same with Kubrick, right? Reclusive, cold. Those are his movies. Same with David Lynch, sort of like on the outside, the sort of happy Boy Scout, but there's something real dark and disturbing going on underneath the surface.
Talk about subtext. Movies. He is subtext. He's the definition of subtext.
Yeah. So, but to become a master filmmaker, you have to first delve into what is your artistic voice, what is your personal voice inside of you, and how do you translate that to the screen? And I think, style over substance is a good way to sort of delve into that arena. And the way I delve into it is, okay, I think about theme instead of style. I read something. What's the theme here? And I think the great artists really they focus on theme first, and everything else second. Right? Okay. Now, Francis Ford Coppola has this great quote, which I recite a lot, where some aspiring filmmaker went up to him and asked him, like, if you had to give an aspiring filmmaker one piece of advice, what would it be? And he goes, find your theme and answer every question you can with it. And he's like, well, that's interesting. Well, can you explain? He's like, okay, well, as a director on set, you're going to get 500 questions a day, okay? And you may or may not know how to answer them all. But if you know your theme, you can answer any single question. And he gave his main example as The Conversation, which was the movie he did between Godfathers 1 and 2, which is a wonderful movie.
It's amazing. Gene Hackman.
Yeah, Gene Hackman plays a professional eavesdropper. He plants bugs on people and he tapes them, and then he gives the tapes to clients. And what happens is that he's very objective at first, just does his job, and then there's this one thing that he records that affects him emotionally. And his fatal flaw is that he gets personally involved in the case, which he's never done before. So for Coppola, the theme was privacy, but furthermore, invasion of privacy, right? So he's the invader of privacy, and in the end, he gets his privacy invaded upon himself. So, okay, so then his costume designer, with that in mind, his costume designer comes up to him. He's answering this question, that question, this question. Costume designer comes up and had probably her most important question, which was, what's going to be the hero coat, right?
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
So we have a regular tan sort of Burberry trench coat. We have a black a camel hair coat. And then we have a see-through transparent rubber coat. And he goes, see-through rubber coat, invasion of privacy. Moving on. It all stemmed from the theme because it was this invasion of privacy. The see-through coat worked, and he would, for every answer, go back to the theme. Now, if you make your directing choices based on the same theme that you have figured out, ultimately a style will bubble up, right? It'll just occur. And I write and talk a lot about Paul Thomas Anderson, who I find he's an interesting case study because most of his movies look totally different stylistically.
Very much so.
Like Boogie Nights versus Punch Drunk Love versus The Master. If you weren't familiar with his work, you probably wouldn't be able to tell it's the same director. However, his theme is very much the same, and I think his theme is finding order amidst chaos. And if you focus on that, it's really stunning how strong that theme is in all of his movies. But what he's doing is he doesn't care about, okay, I have to maintain my style as Paul Thomas Anderson. No, I care about the theme because the theme is what's universally relatable to people. That's, what gets butts into the seats of at least indie movies because, hey, we want to relate to this universal theme. This is something that, can transcend language or regional barriers, and everyone can understand it. And if the director could really harness that theme, then you will have a cohesive movie because you're making all the directorial choices based on this one thing, and then the sum result is the style.
Very interesting. So yeah, like with what I said earlier, like having someone like Nolan who has, I use The Dark Knight constantly as an example because it's such a masterwork. There's so much style in that movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's up there with Heat as just a good heist movie. Regardless,
it works for the story. The world. That's he needed those stylistic flourishes in the world he was creating, right?
But the substance underneath, is so deep and so in depth and goes on for miles.
Exactly, right? Because that's what people connect to, right? I mean, look, you can make a great spectacle film, like big, huge comic book movie, and it could be a fun watch and exciting, but sometimes those movies, when you walk out of the theater, you don't really remember it 5 minutes later. The movies that you remember are those movies that, while it might be a spectacle on the surface, underneath there's a real thematic thread, and it's actually a character movie. You are relating to the characters. That's what you remember because you see yourself in it. Right? That's the only reason you remember these movies is because it connects to you on a personal level.
Iron Man 1. Yeah. Perfect example. That was a character piece, character indie movie hidden inside of a comic book film.
Exactly. And I think good filmmakers the best filmmakers can do that and get away with that. I think, early to mid Brian De Palma is a really good example.
Yes.
Something like that, like Carrie, it's a horror movie, but really underneath the surface, it's a coming of age story about a girl living in a repressed home.
Who just happens to have powers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But that's what's so great because if you have a genre movie that is a metaphor, like it has the potential to reach a much wider audience, but underneath, as the director, you are really focusing on this character movie. So you're kind of sneaking in this emotional connection inside of this bigger genre. And I think that's very smart to do. And that's, one way that you can work with Hollywood and kind of have your cake and eat it too if you're smart.
Now, do you have any advice for working with actors? I know that's a big thing that filmmakers have a problem with because they're never really taught that in film school, if they even go to film school, but they're never taught those things. And it is a nuance to work with actors, especially on a micro budget, which is a completely different mentality than working on a big budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's always nebulous terrain, and probably whether filmmakers will admit it or not, the biggest thing filmmakers are afraid of is talking to actors because, unlike a lens you put on the camera, they can talk back to you
and give you attitude.
Yeah,
and tell you to call their agent.
Yeah, and they have quote unquote opinions. But but at the same time, right? Actors can and should be the most fruitful relationships you have on a production because they're the physical manifestations of emotion in your film, and you need to be very careful and do your homework before you talk to actors. But like you said, on a micro budget, there are a lot more limitations because you don't have a lot of money, so you might not be able to afford rehearsal time, which I really think is essential, is to have some rehearsal time. But the long and short of it is that 95% of the time is you won't have that luxury because you can only afford to get them on the day. So, I've had times where I've met actors for the first time on set. And you're about to shoot. And imagine that, all this money and time.
I've done that. Oh, yeah. My first two features were exactly that. Almost every actor in a new scene, I'm like, I've never met you before. Let's make a movie.
It's crazy if you think about it.
You know who they are, and you've seen their work and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're more than confident that they'll do the job right, but you don't know how they're going to show up on that day. And there is something about working on a micro budget where a lot of actors and people in general, it's hard for them to wrap around their mind that it can be done. And then if you get the wrong actor who has the mentality of working on that TV show that they've been working on for the last 5 years, and they're doing this little indie movie to kind of stretch themselves, and they're like, oh, my trailer's not big. I'm like, trailer? Dude. Dude, there's no trailer here, brother. I hate to tell you that. There's a car, which is my car. Excuse the child seats in the back. That's how we're rolling. And that's one of the biggest and most crucial places I think that you need to go to when you're casting, because just because there might be a big name, if they're not on board with what you're doing, or just
very good point,
or thinking differently of what you're doing, it's a nightmare, and it's done. And I'm sure you've had it with, as well as I have had, nightmare actors on set who just want to act up or want attention or are not on board with what you're doing.
Yeah, you're 100% right, and I've learned my lesson about that too. I think because at first, you just assume when you start doing it, you assume that they read the script and they get it and they know the deal. But they get to set and sometimes what they're used to is not there, and that can be a big problem. So now what I do is, if I have an actor of note interested, I'm like, hey, I would tell that person straight up, look, this is a micro budget movie. This is no frills. Have you done a movie like this before, and are you okay with that? Mm-hmm. Just to make sure, so they know what they're signing up for. I think that's very important to get that out in the open at the start.
Absolutely. And sometimes they'll say, sure. And then they still act up.
It's just.
What do you mean there's no sushi? That. What do you mean there's no sushi? I cannot work without my dragon rolls. Those conversations have had on set before.
Absolutely. But I say I'm lucky for the most part. People who I've worked with who are used to that kind of lifestyle. I mean, they've been nothing but kind and understanding on the set. I mean, not to say that they wouldn't have their moments here and there, but they were very few and far between.
Right.
But it's just about being as honest and open as possible. And I think for a movie like micro budget, ask for rehearsal, but expect no rehearsal. So that means you have to be even more prepared in pre-production. Mm-hmm. So what I do is, I write pretty detailed character bios, just the facts, no emotional, input at all, where they grew up, love life, any sort of cultural or ethnic background, religious background, etc. So they have the bones of the character, and then they do their own homework. You don't want to do all of it for them because they have to find the character too, and they kind of put the flesh onto the bones. And then I have my director's lookbook, which I have a master document of the lookbook, and then I make little alterations where I have one for the producers, one for the investors, one for the actors, so they're kind of more focused to their tastes and what they're looking for. So they know exactly, okay, this is the character arc as I see it. These are my directorial choices on a macro level. So, part of the point is, so when you get to set, there are the least amount of questions as possible. Because if people read your material and get your vision beforehand, they won't every minute say, okay, well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Like, you want to avoid that. Not that you don't want to answer those questions.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
But you want to have those questions answered before you get to set. Because as you know, time is money on set. The clock is ticking. So the less talk, the better.
It's interesting that most of your micro budgets or all your micro budget films are done with a script. You've scripted everything out, correct?
Yes.
See that, and then my process has been for my last two features to be improv, based off of a scriptment.
Cool.
And if you ever, because I've done the script thing, and I will do the script thing again, depending on the project. It's like every project is, different process.
Oh, absolutely.
It depends on what the story you're trying to tell and the limitations and things. But if you ever want to try to go down that road, I tell you something, it is the scariest, but the most exhilarating
I bet.
process as a director, as an artist, as a filmmaker you can ever achieve. You've got to be at a certain place in your life to be able to go and do that, because you are literally on a tightrope with no one to catch you.
Wow.
And it's so cool. It is so cool. I love that process, developing the characters with the actors on the day, but we've talked about it a whole bunch. It's not like we just, I don't make it sound like we just show up and here's a camera, let's make something up. No, there is a style, there's a structure to it all, but it is a fascinating way of making a movie.
Wow. That sounds incredible. Scares the crap out of me.
Exactly. But everyone has their way of doing it. I always tell people, like, look, if you give Pollock, Van Gogh, and Dali a paintbrush and a canvas, you're going to get different styles. But at the end of the day, you're still going to get a painting.
Yep.
And same thing goes with filmmaking. It's not just what a film school textbook teaches you.
No, you're right. And you know what? I mean, so much has to be said about hiring the right collaborators, because,
correct.
I mean, I think people kind of wrongly think of indie film as sort of like this, oh, well, everyone's an auteur or whatever. And okay, this is his his or her complete vision. I mean, there has to be an initial vision, but it's a guideline, I think, for everybody else who you hire, your DP and your production designer. And, you want to hire them and make sure there's a singular vision being executed, but you have to kind of let them do their own thing. And I'm sure you've had those moments on set doing improv where all of your collaborators sort of start to vibe with you and come up with ideas on the spot that are amazing. Oh,
absolutely. Are you kidding me? That last movie that I just did on the corner of Ego and Desire, that's exactly what happened. I mean, we were literally running around Sundance shooting a movie about filmmakers trying to sell a movie, which is great. And then on the day, we're like, hey, let's go shoot over there. Hey, why don't we do this over here? And we just would literally go, as long as it stayed within the theme, it stayed within the what I needed to tell the story. So I had certain scenes laid out. But once you get past that, once I caught what I needed, everything else was like, sure, let's try it. Sure, let's try it. Why not? It's like, we're running around. Let's have a good time. It's not costing us a lot of money.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't say, if you give me $500,000, the improv way of doing things might be a little different, because I have a responsibility to recoup that money.
But I think there's something there where, when you're on set, and even though I pretty much storyboard everything, and I try to have everything sort of as rigidly laid out ahead of time as possible. But for me, what that allows me to do is that allows, when opportunities to improvise come about, I'm ready for it, right? And and a beautiful idea happens or a very happy accident occurs, and you're like, oh, I have to take advantage of that. And like you said, those moments, that's what you live for. Like, oh man, you've made this happen. You put all these steps together to get to this point for this beautiful accident to occur and to get it on film. Because that sort of, it's like catching lightning in a bottle.
Yep, you should capture lightning, right?
Yeah, and those are really amazing moments. So I think that is pretty similar. It's different, but a little similar to what you're talking about, because you have set up guidelines and prepared yourself to make this thing happen, even though you're not clearly sure what that thing is. But once you're there, it allows these beautiful things to occur, and you capture them on film, and that's an amazing thing. Yeah,
and I think, to go down the road of trying to do a film like that, like an improv-based film, you've got to, I've got 25 years behind me, so I've shot a lot. Yeah. So there's a lot of instincts. It's ingrained in you. Yeah. It's, if I'm 20, it's going to be a little bit of different film than it is now. So there is that to be said about it. But I challenge you, sir. I challenge you to go make one. I know you're deathly afraid of doing this. I challenge you. Well, take $5,000 and just go out $3,000 and go out and make a movie like this. I'm telling you. So, and you'll be like, wow, that was
enticing me.
It did. If you want to talk more off air, I can tell you. Let me ask you, how has the new world of distribution changed your whole filmmaking process? How you make movies, how you get your movies out into the world?
That's a really good question, because distribution, it's evolving every day.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, there are more and more platforms. There's probably 100 or 200 platforms I don't even know of that.
There's
just
thousands. There's thousands.
I don't know. But so okay, I think, and I'm dealing with distribution right now with my new movie, No Alternative. We have a deal on. I can't tell you who the distributor is. I can't talk about it. We do have a deal on the table, and it looks like it's going to be released in April of 2019, which is very exciting.
Nice.
But for independent filmmakers, digital distribution is where it's at. Doesn't mean theatrical doesn't occur. We may or may not be doing a limited theatrical. It's still up for debate. But even if you do a theatrical, it's still all in service of the digital distribution.
Yeah, it's a marketing play.
Yeah, exactly. Because what you're able to do is, if you get it into a few theaters, you can get it becomes higher profile. You can get bigger reviews from bigger publications.
Correct.
And you're also able to price it higher on demand for in theater now prices, which actually works for the bottom line. So like you said, it's all marketing. Of course, as a filmmaker, you want to see it on the big screen, but No Alternative is playing at festivals, and so I have and will be able to see it on the big screen. So that's less important to me than it is getting it out to as many people as possible. And even if they're watching in their homes, people's home systems have gotten so damn good.
Insane,
yeah, it's just like it rivals. Like if you go to an art house, God bless art house movie theaters, but yeah, man, the theater experience might be better at home.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's absolutely no doubt about it. When you've got an 85-inch 4K monitor mounted on the wall with a 6 surround sound system, dude, do you need much more?
I go out anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah. You got a nice recliner, got some popcorn. You're dark room. I think you're good, for the most part, unless you're going to IMAX, and then that's a whole other world, but you're not seeing indie art houses in IMAX film.
Well, yeah. They're character movies. They're not big spectacle films.
Right. Exactly.
So what's the point?
I think filmmakers also would you agree that they get caught up with this whole dream, especially our generation, about the theatrical release?
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's nice to see it on the screen, but you should not let that be, a major factor in your distribution, because it could really actually waste a lot of money and resources and marketing, where you could have spent that money or time elsewhere in a more efficient place. I think that's becoming less and less important of a goal. It's nice to have a premiere where you can, have your cast and crew there. So that's a good thing. Festivals are good because that, builds momentum and buzz for the movie. But I think, it's not a major factor anymore, and people should not consider it so.
It's just, you're talking about real estate, very valuable real estate in the theatrical world, where you are competing with Avengers. You are competing with these big, giant tentpole movies for, asses in seats.
Yep.
And the theater is going to go, well, if I put your movie in, will I make more money with your movie for that one showing? Or if I just put Avengers back in there, will I make more money?
Yeah, exactly. So it is a tough task, and we might not even do it with our film. It's up for debate, because it'll take some investment.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as distribution as a whole, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is on an indie level, even if you sign with like a fantastic indie distributor, they'll be doing their own marketing and advertising and outreach, but by far the most important outreach and advertising that you can do for the film is you doing it for the film through social media. Like it's all about building your social media contacts, building that network, personally interacting with people online, and being your own promoter. So, like you said earlier about giving birth to a child.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Like they're raising it, like the birth part. You thought making the movie was hard, but now it's actually hard in many ways, harder to raise the kid in the world. Like
because it's not the fun part.
Place.
It's not the fun part. That's the thing that filmmakers don't get. Like making a baby, really fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
on all aspects. Making a baby, super fun, but raising the baby, a little harder.
Yeah.
From someone who has kids, a little harder.
Yeah, and you can't just wing it, man. You got to have a plan, a strategy. So I think filmmakers really have to keep that in mind before they even begin production on the film. You need to build your social media audience and network. Make sure there's brand awareness already out there.
Mm-hmm.
So when the movie finds a place in the world and people can actually click on something online and buy it, right? That they've already heard about it.
It's tough, man. It's tough. Yeah. It's so tough to get that brand awareness for an indie film.
It's very hard, but it just comes down to grassroots. The good thing, like the positive thing, is that like grassroots promotion, it's become so much easier with the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but you have to be relentless. That's the thing.
Right. That's the thing. It's become easier, but it's not just easier for you. It's easier for everyone.
Yes. so it's hard. It's easier to get lost.
Yes.
And that's the trouble.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about your book, Detour Hollywood?
Yeah, sure. So, we touched on a little bit the making of Detour, and as you can imagine, I had a lot of stories to tell.
I'm sure.
I gained a lot of insight, made a lot of mistakes, did a few things right, I think, but had a lot to talk about. So I decided to, and I took notes all throughout that process. And during a rough cut of the movie, one of my professors, old film professors, watched the film and he gave me notes. I started telling him these stories. He goes, "Have you been writing this down?" I was like, "Yeah, I have." He's like, "You got to write a book about this." So I was like, that was the start of it. And at around the same time the Detour came out, I started to teach filmmaking too. And I always liked being taught, and I liked academia. And I thought, I've learned a lot. Maybe I can teach. So the platform of teaching made me learn a lot about how to communicate this stuff to people and to new filmmakers. And I started writing this book. So basically, it's called Detour Hollywood: How to Direct a Microbudget Film, and it outlines the making of Detour, what I learned throughout that process, and kind of dispels bits and pieces of practical wisdom. Like, hey, this is what I did in Detour, and this is how you can learn from it, or how you can do it either the same way or differently. I also break down my approach to directing, which we talked a little bit about earlier, like the ingredients to directing, subtext and point of view, the importance of theme. So it's a handbook that can be dog-eared and underlined, and something that I keep on set, and I think other filmmakers can keep on set if they need to. There's a handy list of action verbs or quick directions for actors in it. So I always wanted to write a book that is like the what Strunk and White is to English literature. I wanted some sort of small book that can give you quick tips on how to make a movie, or the right way to make a movie quickly and easily.
Very cool, man. Very cool. So I'm going to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions I ask all of my guests.
Totally.
What advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today?
Be okay with not making much money and living on a burrito a day. Give or take.
That's very, very dire, sir. It's very, very dire. But it's very true in many ways.
Burritos are filling.
Well, if you get the good organic stuff, like Baja Fresh style. I'm not talking Taco Bell. Baja Fresh style, yes.
Yeah. But don't quit your day job.
If you have a day job, to keep it.
Yeah, the thing is, it's easy to get bitter about it. Like, I don't like this, but it's a means to an end. And I think it'll take some investment on your end at the beginning of this process, but you don't have to be a filmmaker. You're putting material out into the world that you love, that hopefully other people will love, that will exist after you spring off this mortal coil. And that's kind of amazing. And you got to sit back and really think about, how wonderful that is.
Yeah. Look at Dennis Hopper, who passed a few years ago. He made Easy Rider.
Yep.
And among a million other things he made, but that will live on for many, many, many years to come until the world ends, which is looking closer and closer every day.
Inevitability.
Which is coming closer and closer every day. Can you tell me what book had the biggest impact on your life or career?
Wow, man, that's a good question. Boy, life or career? Well, recently, I love Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. I know it's a very popular book, but I reread that before I write a screenplay every time. Because again, very practical and sort of, Save the Cat's kind of a good model for what I did with Detour. In fact, the editor of my book worked on Save the Cat, because I felt like it's a very practical thing. I could go back to it. So from a technical side of things, I would say that book, I go back to it all the time. Boy, just creatively speaking, geez, again, an easy answer might be Ernest Hemingway, but what I like about Ernest Hemingway's books, particularly The Sun Also Rises, is that he utilizes subtext in a very cinematic way. Like it's his iceberg theory, right? Where he strived in a very efficient manner to only say what he needed to say. The dialogue really has nothing to do with people's behavior, and you only see the tip of the iceberg, but everything else, the real crux of the story, is happening underneath the surface. It is so imbued with subtext that I would recommend any filmmaker to read that book. It's just as a lesson in how to write subtext and actually how to visualize it as you're reading it. So those two books are up there.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
Well, I think it comes down to, editing, because I think the hardest part, the thing I took the longest to learn about filmmaking was that the shorter, the better. And editing yourself, I look at my early short films, I would edit the heck out of them now, right? Because when you're when you're a new filmmaker, it's harder for you to be critical about yourself and be objective about your work and say, oh man, I
spent 5 hours on that shot, I can't cut it.
Yeah. But now I've come, and I really like this place that I'm in now, because the more I cut, the more I feel good about it. I feel better. I cut something out, it makes me more relieved. Whereas before I was like, oh God, I can't cut that. And I think so many filmmakers experience that. But once you've been through it a lot and you've made a lot of material and you go back and you're at a point where I can't do anything about that short film again or that feature film again, but I would do something, that's a bad feeling. You know what I mean? Right. And it always comes down to, I should have cut it more. I should have trimmed it more. And so I am just brutal now, to the point where just take it out, take the scene, take it out, take it out, take it out.
But that takes time. It
does. That's really it. That takes time. You cannot teach that right away. Even if you objectively understand that, emotionally you can't do it.
No, I my first feature, I cut full scenes out. That's not working. Gone. Yeah. I spent half a day shooting that. Doesn't work. Gone. It just didn't work for the movie. And I was like, wow, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a good feeling. But ultimately, the edit of the film is the final rewrite of the script, right?
Yes, of course.
Even though you spent a lot of money on something or you spent a lot of time, it should not matter at all, because, like you said, if it doesn't work for the story, it should not be there.
Absolutely. Now, 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Lost Highway by David Lynch, Mean Streets by Martin Scorsese, and just to throw in a relatively recent one, Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Julian Schnabel.
Very nice, very nice. Good choices, good choices. And where can people find you online?
Well, people can find me on my website, which is WillaimDickersonFilmmaker.com. I could also be followed on Twitter and Instagram at WD Filmmaker. My new movie, No Alternative, which premiered at Dances with Films in Hollywood a few months ago, and it'll have its New York premiere at Yo-Fi Fest, which is the Yonkers Film Festival in New York in November. You could find out more about that movie by following it at No Alt Film, and just look out for No Alternative, which is also based on a novel I wrote a few years ago, which is also available on Amazon. I will put all of those links in the show notes. So, Willaim, thank you, man, so much. You did, sir, drop a few knowledge bombs on the tribe. So thank you very much. Thank you so much for taking out the time. We could talk for another hour, I'm sure. I know. I had a blast, Alex. Thanks for having me on. Thank you, Willaim, for coming on and dropping some knowledge bombs on the tribe. I truly, truly appreciate it. And guys, like I always say, there is no excuse for you not to go out and make your movie right now. If you've got challenges, go over them, figure it out. Just got to keep hustling, got to keep going. And Willaim is a perfect example of that. If you want links to Willaim's book or anything we discussed in the episode, just head over to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/276. And guys, thank you so much for spreading the word on IFH and IFH TV and everything I'm doing here at Indie Film Hustle. Please, if you can teach somebody else something you've learned while listening to a podcast or watching a documentary or taking a course, do so. Pay it forward and get as much of this information out into the filmmaking community as humanly possible. Take credit for it. I don't care. Just get it out there. I want filmmakers to be as educated and have their eyes wide open as much as humanly possible. So thank you guys. You are my foot soldiers out there getting the word out on Indie Film Hustle, and I truly, truly appreciate it. And that is another episode of the Indie Film Hustle podcast. As always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.